Greetings my friends and welcome to Nerd Brain. I'm your host Leland and today we paint. I've got my hands on this excellent mini Slithis the Enchantress from Artisan Guild. I bought it from my local 3D print pusher, dndfigures.dk. Yes, I'm not that lucky that I have my own 3D printer. I really like this mini, it has this Lovecraftian vibe to it. Before I start any new minis, I need to think about what to do with it. Now, if I find minis from Games Workshop, I have these ton of reference photos on the internet and even on the box art. But that's not the case when it comes to 3D printed miniatures. There's not these color schemes that's available for them, so I really need to do my research on this one. And I know where to look. Now while I brush up on my Lovecraft, I've primed this mini white with an airbrush. Oh, just to make it perfectly clear, I only use airbrush when priming my miniatures. Whenever I see another YouTuber doing a painting tutorial and they start out with saying, "Now let's bring out the old airbrush," then you've lost me. This channel is supposed to be for everyone and not everybody has access to a airbrush. So now I'm not claiming that I'm some kind of Golden Demon Award winner, but I hope to bring some pointers to all of you. That's how I learned a lot of cool stuff, by observing others. So that's my whole point here. At this point I had a rough idea on where to go to with this one. Soft light skin with out-of-this-world features. That's why I start with Slithis flesh. I thinned it down to almost a glaze consistency and cover all the skin areas. One of my main reasons for thinning it down is because I don't like brush strokes, especially not on skin. And I want it as smooth as possible. And here my first challenge hit me. I cannot express it more. You need to really study your miniature before you paint. I wanted a purple robe and I just found out that between her legs are bits of the robe and it's really a tight spot. Before continuing with the skin color, I had to block in paint in those troublesome areas. Serious purple, shake it well and thin it down. Now one of those biggest problems with 3D printed miniatures. Let's take Games Workshop for example. They've had many years of experience in making 3D models and with the intent of painting it. 3D printed miniatures, not so much. They have these awesome sculpts and awesome fantastic position they put the miniatures in, but they have a tendency to be really hard to paint in all those cracks and nooks and grannies, or yeah. Like this one, I decided to get some of the purple done in those difficult edges, where skin meets cloth. Here I needed to turn it around a lot. Then I needed to be sure that the paint was in all the right places. And sometimes this means that my paint needs to be thinned a lot. But once thinned, I lose the tone and I have to paint it several times. Here you could use the Citadel Contrast or the Speed Paint from Army Painter. They'll glide into all the recesses. After this, I gave it the final coat of Slithis flesh. Next is Raglan Flesh Shade. I could have gone with Contrast Guilliman Flesh, but decided against it. Contrast, when put on in thin layers, has a tendency to dry faster than a shade, and potentially leave streak marks and unwanted discolorations. With a shade, I can take my time and get it even and smooth. You might be wondering why I haven't glued it on the base yet. It'll come, yeah I know, I'll smudge all the paint I've already done. But a firm grip on, let's say, the rod, no problem. I'll get to the base. With the raglan completely dried, I go back with Slithis flesh. I don't want to use a lot of different paints for her skin. I mix Slithis flesh with Palette Witch Flesh and will end up with extreme highlights of Palette Witch Flesh. At this point, I'm not really concerned with her hands and forearms or her lower legs. I wanted this effect that her body is this soft, pale body enclosed by tentacles, octopus tentacles, and that's the scheme I'm going at. So just to have a lot of unanswered questions. Was this a human being? What does she want? Can this happen to you? A lot of questions, but not a lot of answers. Time for the layering. I'm always nervous and careful in the beginning. You can always add, but it's hard to take it off again. Very thin coats is the key here. Gradually lighten the Kislev flesh, slowly. It's a long process, I know, but it's worth it in the long run. And at this point I'm not so concerned with her arms and legs, and here's why. Blood Angel contrast, and I thinned it down a lot. Again, you can always add, it's harder to take it off. And sometimes I lose patience and I go completely overboard, and that's not good. Building the color slowly will help you get a gradients, and I want to illustrate that whatever is happening to her is slowly consuming her from her limbs and going towards her torso. I start drawing thin lines of blood veins going inwards, like some kind of blood poisoning if you've ever seen it in real life. After this, I decided to go even darker and use Margot's purple contrast. Thinning it down, using the contrast to enhance some of the veins too. Now it starts to look like a real infectious blood poisoning. I'm not a doctor, but I think an amputation is needed here. Now the tentacles. I've created a unique look for her hands and legs, and now I need to connect it to the tentacles in her head. I start out with corn red, but mixing a few drops of Abaddon black in it, just to darken it a bit. Then I go over the entirety of the tentacles. Once it's dry, I gradually mix back to the corn red color, leaving the underside and under the cowl in this dark tone. Then next mix is a mix of Mephisto red to get the midtones. I'm stroking the bristles side to side, and this will give this illusion of a texture. On the mini itself it doesn't have any ridges, and you can achieve this by making lines across the tentacles. And the last red is pure Mephisto red. If it's difficult, just turn the mini upside down in the best position. And the last step, I added some plain yellow. This one is from Army Painter. This works best for me, Demon Yellow. I added a little brush tip of Mephisto red in the yellow, and then I came in with the final highlights, giving the indication that the tentacles texture and also on her hands. Like if this yellow stuff is the final stage of her transformation. With this done, the tentacles and hands are united. Next up, the base. Now I'm not that big on going all in on bases, and that's actually a long story for a video in the future. But the base is primed white, and I'm going to use Grim Black Speed Paint from Army Painter. I'm actually quite fond of this. I just slap it all over and let it dry. Then going back to the mini, and it's time for the robe. I still wanted purple. At this point I could have changed the color, but purple is one of my favorite colors. Thin it down, and you might need to take 2 or 3 thin coats. Serious purple doesn't cover that well. Be careful when painting next to the skin. We can fix it, but at this point it's more trouble than we want. Her shoulder pads, I didn't really know what to do with it at first. Then I thought some kind of chiseled stonework. I don't know why. But every time I do something with the stone or rocks, I always start with Mechanica Standard Grey. Yeah, I had no idea what I'm doing. I'm just doing something. I go over the ropes and her shoulder pad with Nuln Oil. And here it occurred to me, I ran out. Another bump in the road. I need to go out and get a new bottle of Nuln Oil. And of course I didn't record that. But Nuln Oil all over the place. Just be sure not to spill it in over her skin. 2 thin coats and thin coats. We don't want these blotches and streaks from the Nuln Oil. We want it to be dark but not discolored. The ropes were darkened, and now I need to bring it up again. Pure serious purple. I thinned it down to a glaze consistency and started working on all those areas. At this point, don't worry too much about it. We can always correct the ropes. I've dry brushed the base, first Dawnstone and next Baylor Brown to give it a more dusty look. It's all about that base. Now with the base done, it's time to glue her on it. Just a little blob of super glue. Glue can be some kind of super serious religion for a lot of people. I just use what works, and the cheapest super glue for me works fine. With the mini on the base, I can attach her to my handle and start highlighting the ropes. Demonite Hide and Slaanesh Grey are the 2 highlight colors I'm going with. Mixing Demonite Hide in with Sirius Purple just to get a smoother transition rather than surprising the robes with a very light color. Now, tongue straight in your mouth, you'll line all the raised areas. Some places where the light catches it, give it a little extra. Last highlight, Slithis Gray, and this is only for the utmost raised areas and areas of interest, like the cowl and on the edges of her robe. And that is the robe done. Non-metal metal technique. Yes, I know I really suck at it, but I'm keep going at it. I'm doing it until I can. I want her bracelet to be gold, and you could have gone to Retributor armor here, but I want to try non-metal again. Rhinox, Mournfang, Avalon Sunset, and this bright yellow from Army Painter. I try. I really do. It's not perfect. Far from it, but hey, it's acceptable, I guess. And I'll continue practicing this non-metal metal technique all the time until I get it. While I had the Rhinox hide out, I painted her waistband as well. Careful that I didn't touch her skin. And on my wet palette I had a little extra of the Grim Black speed paint. I carefully picked out the gemstone socket, just to give it some color. Once dried, I just painted the gemstone white. This is the absolute simplest way of painting gemstones. White base with a contrast paint on top, and here I chose Blood Angel Red, just to keep the color theme going. Once this is dry, a small dot of pure white, just to give the impression of shine. I wanted to give her tentacles a shine as well, but I went against it, in fear of destroying the model. Now it's time for the staff. This had my head spinning. I had no idea what I wanted to do with it. I wanted it to stand out from the mini, but also I wanted it to fit in with the rest of her. I decided on the first option, going in with Hexrate Flame. This is a cool technical color that I don't use that often. It's a shame, it's neat. Her staff consists of different types of material, and perhaps a little flaw in the 3D printer. Nevertheless, I wanted to mix it of wood element and some kind of warpstone material. After the Hexrate was completely dry, I dry brushed it with Rakarth Flesh. A difficult task as the staff is a bit soft and 3D print has a tendency to be a bit soft. Next I painted the rest dried bark, leaving out the areas with the Hexrate. I wanted this wooden staff that emanates warpstone. That's the idea. And once this was dry, I added a coat of Agrax only on the wooded area. After that, I brought the colors back with Mournfang Brown. But I still wasn't satisfied, I have to admit. But I can always in the future come back and do something if I ever find a better idea on it. Last thing was painting the rim of the base. Now, since I'm going to use her in my D&D campaign, I'm gonna rim her as the rest of the cast. Steel Legion drab. After 3 thin coats of paint, I'm calling her done. This was a fantastic mini to paint from Artisan Guild. Hats off to you guys for making these awesome minis. I love this Lovecraftian theme, and of course she'll be a stand-in for a Mind Flayer in my D&D campaign. I tried giving her some out of this world alien body horror thing, and I think I got it. If you like these kind of videos where I talk into the camera and show off the mini process, this is actually the first time I've ever scripted a video. Usually I just wing it. But if you like this video, please give it a like, share it with your friends that need some pointers in the painting hobby world, which is fantastic, and I'll just see you next time. Oh, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and help me grow my channel. See you next time and stay nerdy.